After getting aboard ship, we traveled from Hilo, Hawaii, and stopping on the way at Enewetak, Saipan, and as we were stopping, we always picked up extra ships, and we ended up with over 800 ships around Iwo Jima. We had all the three divisions together, and we ended up with over 800 ships of every description because of the three divisions we had. And the morning of February the 19th, 1945, we ended up outside of Iwo Jima. Of course, we were told beforehand while we were aboard the ships as to where we were going. But we also knew about it because they bombarded Iwo Jima 74 days before we landed, and 3 days of bombardment by the battleships and the cruisers and everything else. So therefore, they felt like it was going to be a walk in the park because of the number of shellings, the days, and everything else, and the amount of ammunition. General Holland Mad Smith wanted 10 days because he apparently knew more about what they were facing because of the tunnels that had been started long before the Japanese got there, because they were mining the sulfur that was on the island. So therefore, they felt like more bombardment was needed. But they did not. 3 days after the battle started, they pulled up anchor, and a good number of the battle wagons and the other ships left Iwo Jima. I landed H+2, H meaning 9 o'clock when the first wave landed, and +2 means around 11 o'clock in the morning is when I landed on the beach. I landed with Barbara Conable, who was a senator, ended up being a senator under the Nixon administration. He was also president of the World Bank for 5 years after he was a senator. I ended up being a forward observer, and on the 4th day, we got word that the first forward observer team would be going up to relieve the teams that were up there. And on the 5th day is when we went up in the afternoon, and on our way up, we stopped for maybe a half a second, and a large mortar round landed in the midst of us. 1 dead, 10 wounded, and 5 of us walked away. What happened to me is I had a slit on my left canteen of about 4 inches, and I had my poncho or my gun belt hanging down the back of my legs, and shrapnel went through the poncho and created aerated poncho, which was no longer good to me. It never touched my legs. The only thing it did do is make me fall down, and I got up immediately, and I went out. They asked me to go out and try and find a corpsman, and I did that and came back, and the lieutenant of our 8-man team, the radio man and myself, were the 3 from our battery that kept on going to relieve the ones up front that we had orders to do. Right after that, we went through a command post, and to my right was a Marine with his feet in the air, and the top half of his body was cut in two, just like someone had taken a sword and cut him in two, with all his intestines and everything that you could see. I saw it, and also my radio man saw it, and he almost freaked out on us. He screamed and everything else, and I had to yell at him. And what I said was, "Danny, let's move it." He moved, and I got him in front of me so that we wouldn't stop for anything else. We reached our destination that afternoon and relieved the forward observer team. The next morning, we moved up a little bit. And while I was getting ready, we got up to our new position maybe a little bit before lunchtime. I was trying to get my foxhole ready, which was already there, a good portion of it, fix it so I could use the used foxhole. While I was doing that, a hand grenade or small mortar round landed to my left rear. A piece of fragment or shrapnel hit my left arm and just barely cut into my skin. I screamed because it was very hot from the powder and everything else. A small piece went into my helmet on the left side where the round part was and twisted my helmet completely around. And then I could put my little pinky in that hole, but it never went through the liner. It hit it also on the inside, on the round spot, and that's why it turned my helmet around. So we got through that, and we stayed there for the rest of the tour. It was 3 days up, and sometimes 3 days back up front, or 2, whatever if we didn't get a call before that, 3 days. The next time we went up 3 days later, I think it was, we were up a little bit further. We were up on a mound, and the Japanese were firing a howitzer cannon about the size of our 37 millimeter. And it was hitting the top of the mound. And they kept raising it a little bit, and everybody was yelling to get down, and I happened to be the last one. And just as I was getting ready to get down, telephone rang. And I picked up the phone and said hello. It was my dear captain. He asked me one question. There's no dumb answers, just could be dumb answers. He said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Captain, I don't know where I'm at, but I'm here." "Don't you ever answer me like that again." I said, "Yes, sir." And that was the end of that. Not that I was trying to be smart, but I just didn't know. And that's the way it came out. Unfortunately, it came out as a bad joke. It was still just the 3 of us, the lieutenant, the radio man, and myself. We were with the infantry command post, and wherever the captain or the man in charge wanted something out in the front hit, we were to direct the fire to that point, and that's what was happening. Also, while we were up in there at that time, I put my head in one of the caves just enough to see what the inside of the cave looked like. And I could see on the wall a pickaxe point where they chiseled away, and it looked like a sandy rock. It wasn't hard, but it was like a sandy rock that you could easily use the pickaxe as to making the entranceway or making the tunnel all the way through the for protection when the bombers came or the battleships would hit the land, that they were in cover and no one was killed. On the 3rd time up, I was always watching a 1-ton truck. On the back of it, it had rockets. And there was anywhere from 3 dozen to 4 dozen, or maybe more, I don't know. I never was able to count them, because all they would do is pull in back towards the back end of the truck towards the front lines, and they would ignite one rocket, and within 5 seconds, the number of whatever it was would go and fire off. And out of every one I watched, there was one falling short. Until the 3rd time, one really fell short into our front lines, and within 5 minutes later, a Marine was leading another Marine out that was white as a shirt, or sheet, whatever you might want to compare with. He was shell-shocked, of course, and shell shock is similar to a nervous breakdown. And the way that comes about, I learned afterwards, is the lack of sleep you do not get, and it has to be over anywhere from 2 to 4 days that you're not able to sleep. And when those rockets are no more than Kusher bombs that can bust your eardrums or do whatever they can, and you go blank. After that, I don't think I watched them that much. So we got through with the third tour. And I think the last one that I was up on, I almost got to the very edge, but I was about 100 yards to 150 yards from the north end. At that time, they were laying down what we call a rolling barrage. What that means is that they fire at one spot and up at 100 yards and fire again and again until you tell them to cease fire. On the 27th day, they called for the island being secured. What that means is no organized resistance is left in the island, or on the island, I should say. Therefore, they were going to send about 70% of the personnel back and keeping the rest there to mop up, clean up, do whatever they had to do. And they also probably closed as many tunnels as they could because we were getting ready to leave. And they didn't want these Japanese to wander around. On the night of the 27th day, around 2 o'clock in the morning, around 200 Japanese got together and they had a banzai attack. Now what they did they got across the line anywhere from, I would say, 50 people to maybe 100, and 2 or 3 lines of them. And they would scream, yell, anything to make noise. And when they did that, they always felt like somebody would break through and do damage. Well, they did break through because they killed about 40 air pilots, airmen that were asleep and didn't even know they were, ended up, of course, casualties of the banzai attack. But in about 45 to an hour, they quieted everything down. They got all the Japanese that were in the banzai attack